Hello, General Biology, and welcome back. We're in the fourth screencast of the Chapter 6 series, and we were talking about water quality and sustainability. We do have to protect our water, our natural resource of water. We could survive 2 weeks without food. We couldn't survive a couple of days without water. One of the ways that we can do this is by protecting our natural systems, like the wetlands. We learned very late that wetlands provide many ecosystem services. They filter the water to purify the water. They act as nurseries and habitats for organisms. They prevent flooding and erosion. So many services that happen within the wetlands. So if we protect our wetlands, we protect all of those services and the water and the water cycle. As far as our forests are concerned, we need to protect and maintain our forest because they also purify the water that seeps into the soil. And once again, they provide an array of ecosystem services as well, from preventing erosion and flooding and habitats and air purification. All of those things contribute to our sustainability, and if we protect them, in turn, we're going to be protecting that water service that it provides as well. Our plants and flowers that also filter and purify. We also need to consider our watersheds, and we live in the Chesapeake watershed that extends all the way from Virginia up into parts of New York. So one of the things that we need to do is to protect those because that's where our groundwater goes into that feeds our streams and our rivers, and they usually drain in the same place. When I say the Chesapeake watershed, it's going to drain into the Chesapeake Bay. So consider all the rivers and the streams that feed into that watershed, passing farmland, passing industrial corporations, passing through developments, and whatever we put into that is going to be dumped into the Chesapeake Bay. So we need to protect those water sources so that we're not transferring the chemical contaminants into larger bodies of water. We need to clean up pollution in our local areas and protect that watershed. We've mentioned purifying the air as well, and we go back to the idea of those greenhouse gases that we learned about in an earlier chapter, and they are going to regulate our global temperature. They're going to provide our oxygen source. They're going to help protect us against the UV rays. When we add air pollution and smog into the mix, that thickens the greenhouse gases and the particles that are trapped within them, and that produces acid rain. There's smog that is created from the chemical reactions of the gases that we put up. The acid rain comes from those gases and from the burning of fossil fuels, and we get the particles of dust. So that brings the pollution back down. We've got to live sustainably. We've got to make sure that we regulate the automobile emission standards and that we put catalytic converters on cars that are going to be able to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide that goes up, or that we use cars that are hybrids that do not rely on the fossil fuels. They're coming up with hydroelectric cars using clean water that puts hydrogen into the atmosphere, a gas that we need. We need to have clean air regulations. When industries give off pollution, we need to make sure that they're regulated. And it has to be on a global effort. It can't be just here at home, but it has to be globally. What we do here at home affects people across the planet. The way that our ancestors lived 100 years ago, we are reaping the rewards from that. So think of your children and grandchildren in the next 100 years. If we're living in a polluted environment, we're going to hand over a polluted environment to them. We also need to remove the lead from gasoline. Okay, all of this is going to allow us to live sustainably, reducing out what we're going to hear as our carbon footprint, our footprint on the earth, and it's going to maintain those resources not only for us but for generations to come. One of the things that we want to protect is the biodiversity. And biodiversity is, by definition, the sum total of all the genetically based variation in organisms in the biosphere. And it can be broken down into three areas. It can be broken down into ecosystem diversity with the variety of different habitats. You know, we've talked about biomes, but there's smaller habitats within those biomes. Our species diversity. We know there's about 1.8 million species that we have identified, and we estimate that there's about 30 million more that we have not discovered. So we need to protect that. Our species diversity could have the cure for cancer or other diseases. And then another type of biodiversity or section or division is genetic diversity, and this is all the different genetic information carried by species, different species. You've heard of GMOs, genetically modified organisms, and what they're doing is they're taking strong genes from other organisms and they're putting it into organisms that are weaker. And they're using this to help develop better produce that's resistant to frost, produce that is resistant to insects. Is it safe? We're not too sure, but we know that there is a diversity in that, a wealth in that diversity. If we found a gene that stopped cancer, then we would be able to use that gene to prevent cancer in future generations. So when we say, what's the value? All of our medicine, all of our agriculture, all of our ecosystem goods, all of our services, our economy is built on that biodiversity. There are so many different threats that are going on with our biodiversity. Habitat loss. It's one of the greatest threats because humans are plowing under fields, cutting down forests. They're fragmenting places where organisms lived. We're introducing alien species known as invasive species. The stink bug that everybody hates. That's an alien species to North America. It was brought in through Asian fruits. The lanternfly, the Japanese lanternfly, again, not a native species to our area, don't have any natural predators, and it's destroying our trees. Zebra mussels in the Great Lakes. All of these are introduced species that are throwing our ecosystems off balance. We've talked about pollution and contamination, global climate change. We've taken a look at that. Over-exploitation, where we're over-hunting, over-fishing, over-collecting of a species and causing species to quickly decline. Sharks are a big one. We're hunting them for shark fin soup. We cut off their fins and thousands of sharks are dying because of it. And then alterations in our ecosystem composition. We are assembling different species and different interactions within the ecosystems, thinking that it's a good thing, and they're not being successful as far as the future evolution of those species. So we need to stop altering the ecosystems and changing them. Our oceans, with the chemistry of the water changing because of the melting polar ice caps, is a great example of this. So when it comes to conserving biodiversity, we need to protect individual species, we need to preserve the habitats, and we need to consider local interests. I do have a video that I want to show you, but it's a little bit longer than the time we have left. So I'm going to stop this here, and you'll watch the video, and then we'll conclude the chapter in the next screencast. Have a good one.